on average, you'll do 2 sets per exercise. Is that correct? On
Yeah,
average.
typically on average. Yeah.
So, and that's due to the fact that you'll push the intensity quite high. Like you're attempting to hit failure, but if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. You're more so attempting to beat the logbook. Is that accurate to say?
That's accurate to say. When I'm training with my training partner every single session. It's likely on most sessions we'll take some form of small assistance, namely into the shortened position on most movements on the final rep. So there is most likely some form of slight assistance on most exercises.
Okay. So a few forced reps are thrown into the mix. Nice.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's very important to mention for the listeners, because you might have someone who's listening, someone just starting out, they're ambitious. They want to dive into this kind of training, and they're doing it with a whole bunch of sets, a whole bunch of volume. Now, it could be argued that for someone new to get the practice going, and are they actually going to be hitting anywhere near failure? Probably not when you're first starting out. So, yeah. So that's cool. But it's important to have the mindset that as you get better and better at your execution and that level of intensity that's being put into every set, that you are being smart about how many sets per exercise and how much total volume in a session. I'll bring this up because maybe you could speak to this, AJ. Maybe you've experienced it. There's fatigue in terms of like systemic, and there's also local fatigue in a single session. So I've done upper lower splits where I've done like, let me just hit the whole upper body. And then the next day I'll do my lower body and then like take a day off. And you know, that typical 2 on 1 off or just 4 days a week kind of split. And I'm like, bro, by the time you get to the middle of the session, like who's training delts and arms at the end? If you're going to do that, it's like one exercise per body part is like what you can get away with at an advanced level. And I'm not speaking for everyone. I'm speaking to myself because there might be some variances and differences in individuals, but I don't know, man. That's have you experienced that? Like a local fatigue where you're like, this is just too much upper body in one session.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like that's where you would almost coin that as like this like junk volume kind of thing, right? Where you're beating away at a muscle you can't even feel anymore. So yeah, I think that's where certainly full body and upper lower splits maybe aren't the most favorable setups for when someone is truly skilled and very strong as well. So they're creating a lot of systemic fatigue from exercise to exercise. Or at least for their body, they're strong. I know, for example, if I was to do an upper body day, it just would be a nightmare. It would be god awful. I would be at some point in the session of that upper body session that the exercise quality would drop off a cliff. I wouldn't probably be even able to hit like all upper body parts without hitting that point very quickly. So yeah, and it's almost like even just the battery level that we have in our ability to focus and attribute that level of drive into a set, you know, the mental energy that it requires to combine intensity, aggression, and accuracy at the same time, it takes a lot from you mentally. So by the end of the session, you will be mentally fatigued, you know, so and then your focus and your ability to even like contract efficiently will significantly drop off. It's why I talked about, you know, doing the arm work on a different day, is because it's a weak body part. I don't necessarily want to do a reverse push or pull session because I still want to do the good stuff at the front. I don't particularly enjoy going in and starting with biceps on a back day. So I do it on a separate day, maybe just again because of that mental energy that's required to do the first front end of the session. And that's where, you know, maybe onlookers or people listening might argue, it's like, well, if the accurate work for your back is the stuff that's going to be maybe better for hypertrophy, like why don't you put that at the front and then put like the rows at the back? And this like, then the rows don't serve their same purpose. It's like the rows are there as almost like a total body movement. They are there to awaken the nervous system, to get you fired up for the rest of the session. And if anything, they arguably sometimes improve the quality of the rest of my back session, because if I go in and start on an exercise like a straight arm pull down or a D-handle pull down or something like that, personally at this stage in my training career, I'm not particularly amped up to do that at that moment of time, I want to go in and start with something that screams to me that I'm training, and that I'm doing something that I want to like get the rest of my session kicked off with a bang with. And whether that is the most quote unquote optimal way to train for everyone, probably not. But is it the way that, you know, I see the most effective for myself? Yes, 100%.
We'll just call it high intensity training. It would be like one all out set. Let's just go with that for a second, okay?
For sure.
Let's run with that for a second. Now, what I'm curious about is, how do you manage that recovery aspect on a week-to-week basis? Do you find that it might change? Like one week you can handle, I don't know, 4, but then the next week you're like, man, I'm zonked, and it's only been my 3rd session this week.